Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and fellow Bison. My name is Jack Southworth, and I'm a sophomore here at NDSU studying mechanical and electrical engineering. And I'm a student missionary with the Bison Catholic Campus Ministry Programs sponsored by St. Paul's Newman Center. The Newman Center has been serving the ministerial needs of the NDSU campus since 1928. On behalf of Bison Catholic Campus Ministry, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Bison Catholic Campus Ministry currently has over 70 Bible studies on campus, a full-time sacramental schedule at the Newman Center, and a host of leadership and retreat opportunities. If you have any interest in learning more or joining us for one of our Bible studies or events, feel free to talk to one of us after the talk, or find us online at www.bisoncatholic.org. We happily invite dialogue about our Catholic teachings and heritage. Tonight's format will include a keynote talk, followed by a question and answer period. You can ask questions by coming up the center aisle here and asking at the microphone. Please do ask a question and avoid making a statement. Also, please be respectful of all posted guidelines for tonight's event. Tonight's guest speaker is Professor Janet Smith. Professor Smith recently retired from the Father McGivney Chair of Life and Ethics at Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit, Michigan, where she served for many years. In addition to her academic career, she is a world-renowned speaker and author, most famously known for her talk series, Contraception, Why Not?, of which more than 2 million copies have been distributed. She has also served 3 terms as consultor to the Pontifical Council on the Family and 8 years on the Anglican Roman Catholic International Commission 3. Please join me in giving Professor Smith a warm Bison Catholic welcome.
I have to say, I mean, you're an incredibly good-looking audience. It's kind of distracting. I had no idea I'd find this in South Dakota. The older I get, for some reason, the more I get kind of, oh, they're so pretty and so handsome. Anyway, and you are, so this is great to be here. Can you all hear me? If you can't, please do something to get my attention. You could even throw something at me that is what is needed. So, let's see. I've been doing this talk for 30-some years, right? I've got many versions of it, but I always try to update it and change it a little bit for the times and the audience. And it's occurring to me that there's several generations now between me and the audience. And so I thought I'd tell you a little bit how we might have more in common than you might think. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, Warren, Pennsylvania, very conservative, mostly Republican, almost no ethnic groups except maybe some Italians, and my family was Portuguese and Slovenian, of all things. We were Catholic, we were a minority. My dad was a Democrat, very much a minority, and he was opposed to the Vietnam War, pro-civil rights. So we were kind of marginalized in the community, and but it was a lovely little community, and it was just a great place to grow up. These are my parents and 3 of their 6 children. I'm the one on my dad's lap there. A very Leave It to Beaver kind of life, I want you to know. But I think you know that reference. Okay, good. And I wanted to be a radical. I thought I was a radical because I was for civil rights and against the Vietnam War. And I went to Grinnell College in Iowa. Some of you may know Grinnell. It really was then and is now one of the more radical schools in the United States. And I had no idea what I was getting into. Right? Again, I thought, and actually, this is amazing to say this, but one of the reasons I chose the school is the first guy I saw had these fantastic sideburns that went all down the side of his cheek. And I thought, that's a place for me. That's how shallow we can all be at certain points in our lives. So this was in 1970. I enrolled in 1968. And it's an article, I just found it today, that evidently we in Grinnell canceled graduation that year because of demonstrations and on people being killed on Kent State campus. Grinnell was a very radical place, and I wasn't prepared for it. We had the first male homecoming queen, right, in the history of colleges in the United States. There was a protest against Playboy magazine, and several of the leaders on campus disrobed and were naked in a lounge in order to protest this. There was almost a day, I mean not a week, you might say a week, that there weren't protests on campus, and people wanted to shut down classes, lots of strikes, and so you sort of never knew if class was going to be held or not. That's how radical it was. I went with a professor and a couple other students to some event, and the professors and others were all smoking dope on the way to the event. So I'm not unaccustomed to really radical times of great disturbance. And the next picture I'll show you, this is me graduating from high school, and went to Grinnell College. I was just telling someone recently, I went to an event that they were trying to write letters to approve of abortion. And I didn't know much about abortion, but I knew the important question was, when does human life begin? And I raised my hand and I said, I'm ready to write letters, but I really need to know, when do you think human life begins? And let's give a cheer out to Landon, who's debating it tomorrow on campus, all right? Thank you for that. Well, I got up and when I asked that question, when do you think human life begins? And I honestly, I didn't know what I was prepared to think about that. And they started shouting at me, you know, shut up, sit down, we don't need your kind here. And I thought, and I didn't quite look like that. By this time I had little wire-rimmed glasses and my hair was long and straggly. I was wearing combat boots and jeans and some sort of flannel shirt. Everybody on campus was trying to look like John Lennon, girls and boys. And you could see I might have succeeded better than most of them, all right? But that didn't do me any good. So the years were very tumultuous. There were always demonstrations going on, protests. There was feminism. This is, who is this? Everybody knows who it is. My generation knows. I can't believe I forgot her name. Anyway, she's one. They were promoting legal abortions, of course. They were going lawless. There was on the evening news people being killed in Vietnam right in front of our eyes. There were protests at Olympic events for civil rights. There were assassinations, at least 5 in the 1960s, that were very traumatic for everyone, thinking that world leaders could be assassinated. And it's odd that we've lived through a near assassination of a presidential candidate that seems to have made almost no impact on the media in our country. I mean, we were obsessed with these assassinations. Who did it? Why was it done? Et cetera, et cetera. Decades later, we're still looking into these things. And the assassination attempt on President Trump just seems to have been a blip. We don't even know, I don't know, and I follow these things closely, like, did Crooks have any brothers and sisters? I don't know anything about him, all right? Nothing. Never saw a picture of his parents. Never interviewed with his parents. Never interviewed with the neighbors. I mean, it's crazy what's going on. Then we had, one of the most important books was The Population Bomb. That we were living in a concern that there would be so many people on the face of the earth. I had pictures in our classroom as a student in high school, people on the globe falling off. There were so many people. Eventually people would be falling off the globe. And I would say there were some very tumultuous times in the church. I don't know how many of you would have it on your radar screen to be following what's been happening in the church for the last, for a decade. You were still just young teenagers, but I've been following it. You might even say obsessively, but it's been crazy most of my adult life. This is not Notre Dame, but I taught at the University of Notre Dame. We would actually have women who would stand beside priests who sort of more or less can celebrate at Mass. I never knew what was going to happen at Mass when I went to Mass at Notre Dame. You never knew what kind of liturgical atrocity was going to happen. They wouldn't do it today for anything, right? But it was very common then. And people were talking about, the top professors in the theology department were talking about having a schism in the church. And there would be the American Catholic Church, and there would be the Roman Catholic Church. And some question was, who gets which property, all right? So as you sort of come into your adulthood and start paying more attention maybe to what's happening in the church, and if it starts to disturb you, I just want you to know, from my point of view, all this madness shows that the church really is, that the Holy Spirit is really in charge of the church. Human beings are not. We've made a mess of it, all right, a huge mess of it. But we really can rely upon the Holy Spirit. So that just gives you a flavor of what I faced in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then when John Paul II became the Holy Father, I thought, whoa, this is, we turned a corner. And his encyclicals were just phenomenal. You know, when they would come out, all my friends would have a reading group that would sit down and read through these documents and just learn from them, and a phenomenal heritage that is in his documents. And then, you know, since the pontificate, honestly, of Pope Francis, things have gone a little more than a little haywire. I thought we had put that behind us, but it's right here, right now. So you're living in what I would call a world turned upside down. Males are, or it should be, now allowed in female dorms. They not only are allowed in female dorms in, I do have it right here. I'm going to talk a little bit about my parents. When my parents went to college, males were not allowed in female dorms. And if they were allowed in the dorms, it was only in the lounges, the public lounges, after signing up in, and only after, up to a certain hour. And after that hour, they weren't allowed in. When I got to college, it's when we started having shared dorms of males and females. My parents' generation was beyond shocked. They had no idea what they were sending us into. They thought it was what they had which was a very strict environment. Even when I went to college, there were two meal times. The first meal time, girls had to wear skirts and boys had to wear jackets, and we were served our meals. It was incredibly genteel, all right? Very mannerly, very formal. And then they had a later meal where you could just go in with whatever you were wearing. Before long, they stopped that, but they moved towards same-sex dorms. My parents could not believe that. And now I cannot believe that males can compete in female sports. And I cannot believe that males can share female bathrooms and changing rooms. It just, like, what is happening to this world? These are the sorts of things that seem self-evidently true, something that you shouldn't have to argue for, right? It should be something that's a starting point. I remember, you know, when I teach, and I always use analogies, and you could say something like, that's like saying men could participate in female sports. And everybody would go, well, that's ridiculous, all right? And you'd win the argument, all right? Or that's like saying two males could get married or two females get married. And people say, don't be ridiculous. Talk about something that's actually possible, right? And so what your head is filled with as normative, you know, 50 years ago and 100 years ago was considered to be unquestionably clear on what was the right way to think about these things. And I don't think we've found good reasons for those things. It's not as if you engaged in an argument, that's why I put up here Matt Walsh's What is a Woman? Brilliant movie. Even more brilliant is the more recent one, Am I a Racist? If you haven't seen it, run, all right? And you will laugh for weeks afterwards at some of the scenarios in there. He's a genius. He's a comic genius, honestly. And again, he's just talking good common sense. all right? And it either sounds cruel because you're putting reality right in someone's face, or it seems like, why would anybody have to say that? It's so obvious, all right? I mean, we now have males adopting children, and those children are very possibly made through in vitro fertilization. There's a very touching article in the New York Times about interviewing some of the fathers, and they said, we asked our daughter what she wanted for Christmas, and she said, a mother, right? That's what she wanted. And my guess is if you ask most of those kids, they'd want a mother. And if they had two mothers, they'd want a father. It's absolutely natural. But this has become something, I recently went to Uganda, and I was talking about homosexuality of all things. And they at one point, a group were sort of talking and giggling, and then they said, I said, what are you saying? They said, we think everybody in America is gay. I said, what? They said, well, that's all we see on TV. Every show has gay people, every commercial has gay people, all the headlines are about homosexual rights. You must all be gay. I said, well, not quite. Not quite, not yet. And you do have things like this, and you have children attending these events. And there's a period in history where this would have thought to be child abuse. It's criminal. It's a public display of perversity. And now we take it as a pride parade, right? And we have these individuals working in our government, right? And it's just, you look at that and you see that in Uganda. The people in Uganda, they don't believe it. They think it's a costume party. There are really people doing that, are there? Right? And we have Caitlyn Jenner, Vanity Fair, celebrating femininity. Like, males are more feminine than females. It's a complete insult, right? And then we have, of course, males in female sports. So this is the world that you live in. And I have to say, you have a big job ahead of you. You have to return this world to normalcy. And I do apologize because I think my generation played a major part in creating the horrible world that you now inhabit, right? We lost our minds. And you paid the price for it in many respects, and your children will really pay the price for it. One thing I would ask is, as many of you as can possibly become members of school boards in your communities, do that. When you become parents, if you're not homeschooling, which is a good deal. So I watch a surprising number of YouTube videos of fathers and mothers standing at mics chastising school boards for what's available in the library, in the classrooms of those schools. You hear a father or a mother talk, and it makes a great deal of sense why they don't want their child to be exposed to these things. And as Matt Walsh would say, it really is the values, family values, the protectiveness that a father and a mother have for their children are so important, and tell you what is nonsense and what you can't have children exposed to. So I'm talking now on the main topic is why sex is so complicated. And the first thing I want to say is, in a sense, it just isn't, all right? It just isn't so complicated. That's my father and my mother when they got married. My father, I had no idea if he was a virgin when he got married. I wouldn't ask my father that. But 85% of males of his generation were virgins when they got married. 85%. Right? That's incredible. Now, of course, and that doesn't mean they're better men than the men of today. It just, they lived in a culture in which it was unacceptable that if you were a responsible male, you do not want to get a woman pregnant outside of wedlock. And you wanted to love one woman, and you wanted to commit your life to her, right? So you looked for that right woman. You looked for that woman that had the values that you wanted your children to have, right? And that's how it worked. And I would guess that was true of his brothers too. So it can be done, but our culture works against that from, the average age of exposure to porn is 8 years of age in our culture. 8 years of age. boys are having horrible images put in their heads and rewiring their brains. They can, anytime you can pick up your phone and just go on Instagram or something and you see things that are just even advertisements, even TV shows, movies that are PG or basically would have been R-rated at one point. So your heads are being filled with stuff that makes it very hard to be chaste. But the values of remaining chaste are immense, Now this is the first 4 of us. I'm the second one. There were 6 of us eventually. My parents had 4 and 6 kids. And eventually that became, I don't know how many are there, 6 children, I think 17 grandchildren, maybe more, great-grandchildren, etc. That's my parents at their 50th wedding anniversary. They were married for 62 years before my dad died. And those were pretty good years. And they raised a pretty good family. And they had a very happy life, right? Members of their community, and they were everything to us. They were John and Ann Smith, right? They were rocks, all right? Everybody knew that if you needed wisdom, and they were simple people in a certain sense, simple people. But they just performed their duties in this world. You don't have sex until you get married. You have kids. You raise them well. You contribute to your community. You perform your duties well, and life will be good. And it was, right? It was. But my parents, in the 50s, they had 4 children in 6 years, and didn't have really any money. And my mother went and asked our doctor if there was anything they could do, right? Basically asking for contraception. This just appeared in the late 1950s. He was Catholic, Dr. O'Connor. And Dr. O'Connor said, Ann Smith, I'm Catholic and you're Catholic, and that's an end of that, right? And she went home and my father said, what did Dr. O'Connor say? He said, just what he said. And so they practiced rhythm, which is a difficult form of natural family planning. There's much more accurate and easier forms now, which enables a woman to read her fertility cycle. And 7 years later, they had a surprise pregnancy, and 2 years after that, they had another surprise pregnancy. And my dad has said several things that just any parent should say this, honestly, whether they mean it or not. He would say, nothing has made him happier in his wife and children, and he says he just wishes he would have had more. That's one of the most beautiful things a father can say. I wish I'd had more. It's the most meaningful, wonderful thing I've had in my life. Then he would tell us, he said, I wanted 4, your mother wanted 2, we both got what we wanted. and then he would say he had 6 only children. We were so spoiled. Right? That's how he would talk to us. All right, so I'm going to just give a review of some of the reasons for the church's teaching on why sex belongs within marriage and why contraception is against God's plan for sexuality. One of the best books that has ever been written on the philosophy of sex is Carol Wojtyła's, then eventually Pope John Paul II's book, Love and Responsibility. It's absolutely a brilliant work. I think it's equal to certainly his Theology of the Body, which is another absolutely brilliant work. And he says the most affirming statement that you can make to another person is, I'm willing to be a parent with you, right? I'm willing to be a parent with you. Even more important, of course, is I want to be a parent with you. And even more importantly is, will you be a parent with me? I've actually had people listen to my talk and say that one woman said, my husband said that when he proposed, it's like, I want you to be the mother of my children. Okay. If someone says that to you, fall over. I mean, that's a marriage proposal. And it's a beautiful marriage proposal, right? Because when you have children with another person, that is truly a lifetime commitment, right? And it means, I like your eyes, I like your walk, I like your laugh. I want to bring in another one of you into the world. And I trust you. I know that you have the values, that you'll be a good father or a good mother to my children. It's the ultimate of compliments, the ultimate of affirmations, is to say to a person, I want you to be the parent of my children. If you can't say that, no. I had a former student from Notre Dame, beautiful girl, absolutely devout Catholic, went off to graduate school, met this absolutely charming, fascinating man. They started having sex, and she knew that was wrong, and began to feel bad about it, or guilty about it. She decided that it had to be stopped, but she still was totally smitten, if you might say more than that, with him. But he was a very lapsed Catholic. He hated the church. He had no interest in Catholicism. And they'd still spend time with each other, and I was with her at one point. They were having some volatile conversation on the phone, and when she got off, I said, what's going on here? I mean, why do you spend so much time with him? If you can't break up with him, marry him, but it's going on too long. And she said, well, I've never met a man that attracts me as much as he does. I've never met a man that captivates me as much as he does. But I do not want him to be the father of my children. Right? I said, why don't you write that down? Maybe 5 times, 25, 50. Eventually you'll get it, all right? Eventually you'll get it. And she did break up with him. And eventually she married a wonderful man who has been a wonderful father to the children they've had together. So that's a deal breaker. And John Paul II is very, very clear about that. It's a deal breaker. He expects people to be, he calls the sexual attraction to be a powerful raw material of love. He says it's raw material of love. It's not love. It's raw material. He says, and then you see if this attraction can be shaped, that you can not just be attracted sexually, but attracted to all of the characteristics that the person has. Again, and if this person will be a good parent, I promise you they'll be a good spouse. You have to be generous and kind and hardworking and self-sacrificing and all those things. That makes for a good spouse. Right? I'm sorry that this is a little bit off, but John Paul's one of his favorite phrases is don't use persons. Every person is by nature capable of determining his or her aims. Anyone who treats a person as the means to an end does violence to the very essence of the other, to what constitutes its natural right. So he says having sex outside of marriage is using another person. It's simply using them. You're not respecting them. Because obviously, 2 things could happen, maybe more. One is you could become emotionally attached. It's probably happened to you or someone you know. Right? One of the 2 of you gets very emotionally attached and the other one's not ready for that. And there's heartbreak. There's emotional attachment without sex. With sex, it's just, well, you were willing to have sex with me. How can you just walk out? Well, it was just about sex. Well, what am I? What am I if you treat me that way? I thought you cared about me. Well, I did, but I mean, I didn't say we were going to get married or anything. So what's the problem with you? Well, golly, maybe you don't say golly. I say golly. What is this? All right? And then obviously a pregnancy could happen here. And what happens with a pregnancy? What do you do then? I had a friend in college who was sleeping with the handsomest boy on campus. And I was a little maybe jealous. But I've always been this hard-headed realist about these things. And I asked her, I said, what happens if you become pregnant? And she says, I don't know him well enough to ask. Right? Now you didn't laugh at that. Why didn't you laugh? I'm curious. I'm thinking you didn't laugh because you know that's very common. That's not uncommon. Why do I find that surprising? People are having sex with people all the time, but they wouldn't dare ask what happens if I get pregnant. Because that's a deal breaker. Who's talking pregnancy here? What do you mean pregnancy? I mean, I thought you were taking precautions. If you're not taking precautions, I'll take precautions. Well, listen, I'm a decent guy. I'll pay for half the abortion. Or no, listen, I'm a really decent guy. I'll pay for the whole abortion. But what are your choices if a woman gets pregnant outside of wedlock? right? Well, get married. And a lot of marriages have happened. When I was teaching at Notre Dame in the 1980s, a lot of these kids were conceived out of wedlock. But women were very much insistent in the 60s, before contraception became widely available. If he's saying, let's have sex, she's saying, what happens if I get pregnant? It's the first thing out of her mouth. What happens if I get pregnant? And he's smart enough to say, well, I'll marry you. Of course I'll marry you. That's why I love you. We'll just move our wedding date up a little bit. That's what he would say, and they did it. And that's because that's what was going on. But now it's like, again, I thought you were taking precautions. I'll take, you get pregnant, what do I do now? Do I marry him? I hardly know him. And I'm not sure I even really like him. And I'm not really certain I want him to be the father of our children. And I'm not ready. I'm not ready to be a mother, and I'm not ready to be a wife to him. So what do I do now? Do I get an abortion? I hope not. Right? It'll stick with you for the rest of your life. You've taken the life of your own baby. And the men should not forget the life of his baby has been taken. Right? Men are meant to provide and protect. And this should strike at their hearts as well as the heart of any woman, that he conceived a baby, probably by deceiving a woman about how serious he was, and now that baby is no longer alive. I remember at Notre Dame, I was talking to young men, and I said, what are you going to do? I said, do you think premarital sex is moral? They're saying, well, as long as she consents. I said, really? I said, well, let's think about that. I said, do you want to be a father someday? They said, oh, yeah. I said, well, let's think about being a father of a little girl. Do you want to, take her to the playground and put her on a swing and swing her back and forth? Take her to a father-daughter dance? And, oh, yeah. I said, okay, so you want to be a father someday, a little girl, and suppose when she comes to college, would you want her to date a guy who thinks like you? And you know what their response was? That's not fair. That's what they said. That's not fair. Right? Because you're making me think that this woman has rights, that she needs to be protected, that she needs to be cared for, instead of my taking advantage of her. And that's unfair. I just want to think of, if she consents to doing this, that's good enough. I don't have to think past that. Right? So what does the woman do? Can she get married? Maybe. Have an abortion? Hope not. Put the baby up for adoption. We have 3 children in my family circle who were adopted, and we adore them, and we're extremely grateful to their parents. But it's hard all the way around, on the woman, on the children, on the father of the child. So there aren't a lot of good options. Or do you become a single mother on your own? I don't know one single mother, and some of them do a great job, that would like to have a husband helping raise the child. So you, a male, and has gotten a woman pregnant, and she permitted, I'm not saying it's rape, she consented. But you guys are kind of charming sometimes. A little hard to resist you sometimes, And you say, well, she consented. You say, well, she did. But still, you might have a child which needs a father in their life for the rest of their life. So even if she consented, you're taking advantage of her, and she's being foolish. You're using each other. So, John Paul II has this phrase, a personalistic norm. He says, a person is a good towards which the only proper and adequate attitude is love. And when you love a person, you want to do what is good or best for them. You don't want to take advantage of them. You don't want to use him. And that's a constant principle throughout. And this is his distinctions. Okay, like, kind of small. We use things. We enjoy and respect person. Respect means never using persons as things. Love is not using because it is reciprocal. It includes consent, but it's not only consent. I mean, you can have sex after marriage because you've made the commitment. I'm here for you. I'm here for you forever. Right? You can depend on me. You can depend on me for a complete emotional connection. And you can depend upon me to be here to take care of a child together. This is the difference between contraceptive sex and not contraceptive sex. Contraceptive sex says, I want to have sex with you. Right? It means no expectation or preparation for a child. This couple is very sensuous, anonymous faces. You can have sex with contraception with just about anybody. Foolish, very foolish, but our culture does it all the time. But to say, I want you to be the mother of my children, to leave sex open to a baby, that contraceptive sex is a momentary thing. It just has a momentary meaning. I want to have sex with you, I want to have this great pleasure with you. Non-contraceptive sex means I'm open to having a baby with you. And that means forever. That means I'm making a commitment to you that I make to no one else. I can only make it to one person. To be in a lifetime relationship with you, to be here for children. Now, John Paul II has an interesting term called conscious parenthood that actually appears in Humani Vitae. And he says, marital love requires that spouses be fully aware of their mission of conscious parenthood. Today's society justly calls for conscious parenthood. Thus, it is important that it be rightly understood. He says, number one, it means being aware that having sex leads to having babies. You see that in our culture today, people say, oh, not necessarily. I mean, you could be using contraception. It doesn't necessarily mean it leads to babies. We'll see how much contraceptive sex is reliable for not having babies. Right? But I would like to put a Sharpie on, maybe in a tattoo, on every forehead that says sex leads to babies. I've got a magnet on my refrigerator that says life is sexually transmitted. Right? It's not hard to get. It's not hard to get. You know, years ago when I started this, when I would talk to young people about why premarital sex is wrong, I would say, you shouldn't have sex unless you're in love with someone. And now when I say that, people are kind of surprised. They say, really? Why would that be? We're adults. We're attracted to each other. We have needs. All right? And I'm not ready to get married. So why can't we have sex? And I said, well, babies, maybe that's one of the reasons. Oh, well, you know, again, one of my dear family members, he was having sex with his high school girlfriend. And I did ask him, I said, what happens if she gets pregnant? And he said, well, she's taking, we double do it. So I use a condom, she's on contraception. It won't happen. And we were at a big family event, and I said, there's a whole lot of, it's not going to happen in this room. But it is. I said, she's only 16, so you're only 18. Are you ready to deal with a pregnancy if it happens? Are you ready for those 4 options that I mentioned to figure out one of them? He stopped having sex with her. Right? He figured it out. He saw that it was not a good choice. But you have to be aware that having sex leads to babies. You have to accept and prepare for that consequence. I would say, you put your foot on the gas pedal of a car and it goes forward. You don't say, oh, how did that happen? Right? We know the cause and we know the effect. You have sex, she gets pregnant. You don't say, oh, how did that happen? Right? It shouldn't have happened. You say, wait a second, you do A leads to B. We know that not always, not 100%, but often enough, and it is such an important consequence that you want to be prepared for it. You have to accept the consequence as good for the child, spouses, society, and God. What contraception says to God is, we don't think you made our bodies right. We want a little attachment, little dial that will dial on our fertility and dial off our fertility. You made a mistake in making it so easy to get pregnant through sex. So we're going to make an improvement on the body. We're going to use contraception. And I'm going to show you why it's a violation of the body. But you have to say, gee, it's a good thing that babies come from sex. Babies are a wonderful thing. And they make a man and a woman make a commitment to each other. And most people will tell you there are tons better people after they got married than before. they had no idea how selfish they were and how hard it is to become unselfish and care for another person. Then you get a baby, oh my gosh, you know, sleeplessness, poop everywhere, spit everywhere, right? At the same time, oh my gosh, so much cuteness and joy and happiness and meaning. And you say, there's nothing, I was not prepared for this, for the joy, I was not prepared for the sleeplessness, I was not prepared, but it's the best thing ever, right? And people avoid that as if it's the worst thing ever, right? Take these chemicals for year after year as if it's the worst thing possible. And you need to be ready to be a parent. And you need to choose a spouse who will be a good parent. And that's what he calls conscious awareness. He says, don't inflict parenthood on someone who is not ready. About contraception, he says, if the possibility of parenthood is deliberately excluded from marital relations, the character of the relationship automatically changes. It changes away from unification in love and in the direction of mutual, or rather bilateral enjoyment. You're just pleasuring each other rather than making love. You don't even hear that phrase anymore. And I say having sex way too often when what I want to be saying is making love, right? Making love is a beautiful phrase. And then you're doing it by providing this great physical pleasure to someone else, and that person's offering you this great physical pleasure, and it could end in a pregnancy, in a baby that bonds you forever, right? That's making love. Having sex means rubbing up against another body with no commitment, no long-term expectations of what this will be. All right, Humani Vitae came out in 1968. And in that document, Paul VI said there were 3 reasons why contraception violates God's plan for sexuality. Now, I know that most of you most likely are part of a Catholic community, and this phrase that God has a plan for sexuality is not too foreign to you. Of course he has a plan for sexuality. He made them male and female, all right? Made them male and female. He told them to cling to each other, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth. Pretty darn clear, all right, what our sexual being is all about, right? But the rest of the world says, God's plan for sexuality? What the heck is that? And of course, why should I care? I want to do what I want to do in the way I want to do it. The believer says, well, God made this universe, and he made it a good universe. And the way God made things is good. Now, we're fallen creatures, so we mess up a lot, but it's pretty clear what God made sex for, both through our objective understanding and Scripture. So, Paul VI says it's a violation of the good of a woman's physical and psychological health. I'm going to give you a lot of evidence that contraception is an assault on a woman's physical and psychological health. And you males, if you care about a woman, you won't let her take contraceptives. You won't let her say, I love you. Why would I let you do this? I had a priest friend, and he used to take those preparing for marriage, and they had to read the insert that came with the pill of all the 33 counterindications for the pill. And then he'd ask, like, man, would you take that? He said, no. Then why would you let her take that? She's watching him. You know, what the heck? I spoke at a major campus at the University of Michigan State University. And the Knights of Columbus group put all these signs around campus that were pretty hilarious to try to get people to my talk. And one of them was that men who love women won't let them use contraception. It's a sign all over campus. So you could see people looking at that thinking, what the heck does that mean? All right? It was just fantastic as far as just being provocative. He also says it's an impediment to the total self-giving of spousal love. I've talked already about that, but again, there's a barrier, whether it's a physical barrier or not. You are not giving of yourself completely. You're withholding your fertility, which is a beautiful part of your being, right? And it's a part of your being that's going to allow you to create a new human being with this person. Whoa! What is it? A Tesla is a pretty darn fantastic thing, but a human being is infinitely, infinitely better. And it's within the range of virtually everyone that we could do such a great thing as bring someone with an immortal soul into existence. We can do that. He also says it's a rejection of God, again, as the creator of new life. I mean, God's saying, I made sex for babies. He said, well, I don't want to use it for that. I want to use it for something else. Sorry, God. You have your opinion and I have mine. Right? Doesn't work. All right? So the first line of Humanae Vitae says, it's a beautiful phrase. God has entrusted to spouses the extremely important mission of transmitting human life by which they offer a service to God. In our culture, sex is largely, I hate to say it, pornographic. It is just something for pleasure. And to think that sex is meant to be a way in which we serve God, it's a sacred thing. Our culture can't get our minds around that. Sex is a dirty thing. Sex is pornographic. What do you mean sex is sacred? What is sacred? It could bring forth a new human soul, which is immortal, right? Again, man is an immortal creature. And God creates each and every human soul. I got this from the Philippines back in the 90s. I just have to have it because it's from my memory of that time. And I mean, the male provides the sperm, the woman provides the egg, and God provides the soul. So every time a couple is engaging in sexual intercourse, they're basically inviting God to create a new human soul. And he can't do it any other way. I mean, he did it in the past. As I always say, he made males from mud, and he made females from the rib of a rational creature, which actually explains a lot when you think about it. Right? Think about it. Males mud, females rib of a rational creature. He did it otherwise, but he decided he wasn't going to continue that. Made male and female. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Contraception, again, I got the same slide from the Philippines. Contraception is a barrier between the sperm and the egg and God. It's saying, God, you're not welcome here. We don't want to engage in this great, pleasurable, wonderful act, but you're not welcome here. Right? So you're rejecting God. Now, what made all of this possible, what has changed everything, is the pill. This was in the 40th anniversary of the pill. So small, so powerful, and so misunderstood. It arguably is the most culture-changing invention that has ever happened. Right? There's other contenders. There's antibiotics, there's the car, there's airplanes, there's computers. But something that changes the fundamentals of male-female relationships gets right at the heart of humanity. Right? And things have never been the same. And I want to say they're a whole lot worse since contraception's been on the scene. I think actually this is what I have something. All right. A quick lesson, and you probably don't know this, right? And there's something really wrong about your not knowing this. Not that you're at fault. Again, my wretched generation has not taught you what you need to know. We didn't know it either, right? But this is a chart of a woman's fertility cycle. A woman has generally 4 hormones that are impactful on her sexuality and her fertility. So if a woman had a regular cycle, it would be 28 days. And this row shows you a woman's cycle, in fact, who does not get pregnant. Right? A woman is born with all the eggs she's ever going to have. Several 100,000 to up to 1 million. So we're born with all the eggs we're going to ever have. And during our fertile years, we release 1 egg a month. We don't have a second ovulation. They might be 2 eggs or 3 eggs, but that would be pretty much right at the same time. All right. So she ovulates once a month, and it's generally around day 14. So she has this buildup of estrogen and progesterone that help her ovulate, that tell the fallopian tube to ripen and release an egg. And that, again, is released around day 14. Now, at the same time, she is, this is the bleeding that she has in her menstrual cycle that's from the month before, because her endometrium is building up a nice bloody oxygen-filled lining of the uterus, all right, which is going to be the new home for the little human being. And if she were to have sex during a certain period of time, I'll explain that to you, and get pregnant, that little human being would embed in the uterine wall, and then it would continue through the pregnancy. This woman doesn't get pregnant, so every month she's going to slough off that bloody layer, which was meant to be a home for a new human being. You'll see at the same time that the estrogen goes down because it's not needed to ripen and release an egg. That's happened. Progesterone is what's going to continue the pregnancy. If she got pregnant, this would stay up for the rest of the pregnancy. Many women have miscarriages because they don't have enough progesterone in their system and have to have supplements in order to keep the pregnancy going. So this is an egg that is ripening until it's till ovulation, and then if it doesn't ripen, within 24 hours, it basically dies, and it becomes this corpus luteum, all right? And it's that she cannot possibly get pregnant for the rest of the month because the egg lives for only 24 hours in a woman's system and can be fertilized for only 12 hours. A woman can get pregnant only 12 hours every month. The rest of the time, it's impossible for her to get pregnant. I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. But then there's these other hormones that help her ovulate and destroy then the egg that wasn't fertilized. So you'll notice this huge uptick of hormones in a woman's body around day 14, and then a huge downtick of hormones 14 days later. Now, ladies, it's long since I can remember this as a personal experience, but PMS is a very real thing, right? You can see here that a woman is chemically not the same person from one day to the next. Males, you might have noticed this. Right? Mostly females, this is how it works for us. We get up in the morning, and we don't know whether we're going to be the sweetest human being on the face of the earth or a real shrew. And generally, we don't know until we talk to a male. And somehow, that makes it perfectly clear to us. And he's saying, but yesterday, you loved me, and you thought I was just the best thing going. And now today, everything I do irritates you. What's going on here? And I'll tell you, this is what's going on here. And then it happens again, a complete shift in her chemical makeup at the end of the month. Have some sympathy for us, all right? But we need self-knowledge. We need to know when we can chart our cycles and we can know where we are. And Mary, I had a friend who just had this she definitely had it with her husband. They have a huge fight every month, right here. And she would just say, Dennis, I don't know why I married you, you're just impossible, blah, blah. He said, Jane, 2 days ago, you thought I was the cutest thing on the face of the earth. And in another couple days, you will again. I said, this happens every month, and I can put it on the calendar, and I'll show you that next month we'll have exactly the same fight that we're having right now. It's good for both of them to know that, all right? Take her for ice cream. That's usually a pretty good response. All right, now, I said that a woman could get pregnant only 12 hours every month. There's another factor that needs to be taken into account, which is male semen. All right, the male semen exists really to help carry the sperm to meet the egg, all right? And the semen lives within a woman's body for about 7 days, all right, about 7 days. The other thing that a woman needs is that fertile mucus, right? That those luteinizing hormones, etc., they produce the mucus that is going to help carry the semen and the sperm to meet the egg. So this woman, this is her menstrual cycle where she's bleeding. Then she has like 6 days where there's no fertile mucus available. This is for people women in third world countries. I'm not going to talk about menstruating people or pregnant people, all right? I'm talking about menstruating women and pregnant women, all right? So there's this sense of dryness in her system for these days. There's no fertile mucus. There's no egg, so she cannot possibly get pregnant. Just 2 elements that are needed are not there. Somewhere around day 10 or 11 in a woman's cycle, she starts producing this fertile mucus. Again, she has a sensation of wetness. That fertile mucus can help carry the sperm to meet the egg. Suppose she ovulates right here. If she had sexual intercourse here, but not here, here, or here, for 5 days, that fertile mucus can keep the sperm alive and carry it to conceive. If she doesn't conceive, pretty rapidly, that fertile mucus dries up. And the rest of the month, she has a dry sensation in her system, right? So this is the only time of the month she can get pregnant. But she can get pregnant because of sexual intercourse before that day and within 12 hours of her ovulating. So there are different ways in which a woman can determine where she is in her cycle. She can learn to identify the presence of this fertile mucus. She can learn to identify that it's no longer there. Her temperature actually goes up after she ovulates and stays up for the rest of the month. There are some other signs too. So all right, let me go back a little bit here. I'll go back. Huh. Oh, that's because I'm recording it. Aha. All right, well, I'll stop for a minute. All right. So this is a woman's natural cycle. When a woman is taking any one of the chemical contraceptives, she is completely obliterating this movement in her body, all right? When a woman is pregnant, again, she has high progesterone in her system. So if she's taking the pill, it's changing this fertile makeup, and it's making a woman's body think it's pregnant. Because if a woman is pregnant, she can't get pregnant, right? So they've learned to put the hormones in a woman's body that makes the body think it's pregnant. So she doesn't ovulate. And if she doesn't ovulate, she can't get pregnant, right? But this means she has a very unnatural state. She does not have this swaying of these hormones. And these hormones are very important for relationships with males, right? We're going to find out that they're very important. And if a woman suppresses those hormones, she has a very different relationship to males than when she has fertile cycles. All right. So, I think I do this now, maybe this. Okay, so contraceptives have changed everything. How we think about sex, how we think about babies, how we think about marriage, how we think about the body, how we think about homosexuality, how we think about transgenderism, how we think about reality. That little pill has changed everything. These were the expectations that would come about if, wait a second, it has a mind of its own. Okay, we thought the pill was going to ensure sexual freedom. It was going to advance happiness. There would be fewer unwed pregnancies. There would be fewer abortions. There would be better marriages. We could test many partners. We could cohabit and test out relationships. We could have sex without the fear of pregnancy. And we could control overpopulation. Right. For some reason, it has now stopped allowing me. Oops, here we go. 1 out of 4 pregnancies ends in abortion. 45% of marriages undertaken today will end in divorce in 20 years. Only 39% of babies are born out of wedlock. 1 out of 5 Americans, and this isn't just sexually active Americans, I mean, they have to be sexually active to have had an incurable sexually transmitted disease, but they're counting babies and old people. So it's more than 1 out of 5 Americans that has an incurable sexually transmitted disease. As they say, that's the gift that never stops giving. All right, we're in a sexual mess. The single largest group living in poverty in the United States are single mothers with children. The fathers of those children are often cut adrift. There's the use of porn and the damage it does to marriages. Same-sex marriages are legal. Transgenderism has affected nearly everything, from drag queens in libraries, transitioning of children without parental consent, and dominance in women's sports. Paul VI said there would be a general lowering of morality, there would be less respect for women, there would be coercive control by governments over sexuality, and we treat our bodies like machines. Let me see. I'm sorry, but I'm having trouble with that one. We'll move here. This is the growing acceptance. Oh my gosh, it has a mind of its own. Sorry. This is the growing acceptance of transgenderism. All right. For some reason, it's cut off the year here, but let's say that's like 1990 even. Almost no one accepted transgenderism, and now it's 71% of people accept it as a normal state of being. These are the medical reasons for prescribing contraceptives. People have PMS, acne, endometriosis, ovarian cysts, and it can't help with these things. But the point is there are natural means to help with them. I'll talk about those in a minute. But women taking contraceptives for these reasons are not contracepting. They're taking a pill that can work as a contraceptive, but they're also taking a pill that can reduce endometriosis, that can reduce cysts, etc. So the contracepting means you're taking something or using something to prevent conception. These women taking the pill, which isn't, they're not taking it in order to prevent a pregnancy, but again, to reduce acne, endometriosis, and ovarian cysts. The point is there are amazing alternatives. There are natural hormones that women can use. There's natural progesterone. They can have better nutrition. Our hormones are developed through our nutrition. For endometriosis, you often need surgery, and a great place to go for this information is the Pope Paul VI Institute in Omaha, Nebraska. There's a marvelous website called Natural Womanhood that has fantastic articles on the effect of the pill and natural methods. This book by Marilyn Shannon, Fertility Cycles and Nutrition, is astonishing for helping women who have PMS, who have infertility issues, etc. Another one is Taking Charge of Your Fertility. Contraception leads to unwanted pregnancy. That's very clear. As I mentioned, people talk about accidental pregnancy. And the fact is you can't get pregnant by accident. Can't be done. Right? You can fall off a cliff by accident. You can slip on a banana peel by accident, but you can't get pregnant by accident. It actually means something's gone right, not that something's gone wrong. Right? Women from 15 to 44 who have ever used contraception, studies show that 98% of women in the United States from ages of 15 to 44 have used some type of contraception. It's incredible. Contraceptive failure rates. The condom fails 18% of the time. 18%. Right? That's let's just round that up to 20. Would you get in a plane that that crashed 20% of the time? Would you get in a car that the brakes failed 20% of the time? I don't think so. All right. Diaphragm 12%. The pills 9%. There's two kinds of people in this world. I have family members who, when they hear the pill has 9% failure rate, they say, oh, it almost never fails. It almost never fails. Only 9%. I hear 9%. I hear 100%. It's gonna fail. All right. It's 9%. But that really means over a year, 9%, 9 women out of 100 are using the birth control pill are going to get pregnant. Right? This family member of mine, who thinks it means 100%, she has had 3 pregnancies out of wedlock. And one time she says to me, I said, are you going to just keep doing this? And she said, no. And I said, well, how are you going to, that means you're not going to have sex till you get married again? She said, no, I'm going to use contraception. I said, weren't you using contraception the other times? Well, yes, I was. Okay, it doesn't work for me. Percentage of U.S. births to unmarried women by race in 2017. All right? Almost 30% of white babies are born out of wedlock. That's not good for the babies. It's not good for the mothers. It's not good for the fathers. It's not good for the culture. American Indian and black babies, it's almost 70%. In Detroit, it's 80%. 80% of babies are born without a father. I gave a talk to a group of African American boys in Detroit about premarital sex being wrong. And I said, I'll bet most of you in this room don't have a father in your lives. They almost sunk in their seats. I said, if you don't, I'll bet your friends don't. What does that mean? You don't have a father at breakfast, at dinner, talking about girls, talking about sports, talking about cars, giving you guidance. Probably your mother and your father fight a lot if they have anything to do with each other. Probably it's hard to know who gets you on the weekends and who doesn't, if he's at all interested. I said, let me ask you something. Let me recommend something. Don't ever do that to a child of yours. Don't ever have a child out of wedlock and neglect that child. You hate it. You see the harm it's done to others. It's not just black babies, of course, it's white babies as well. Any baby born out of wedlock. But I was talking to black boys at this moment. I say, you want to do something great? Find a woman you love, that you want to love, you're prepared to love for the rest of your life. Marry her, have babies, and be there for those babies. That's actually a great thing to do, and it's within your grasp. It leads to abortion, contraception. Main reasons, only 0.3% of abortions are because of rape. 0.03% are because of incest. Most of the reasons are personal choice. Too young or immature, not ready, don't care for the guy, economic, they don't want to change their lifestyle, the mother's already single or in a poor relationship, enough children already, and sex selection. Okay, abortion rate is fascinating to me that most of them are cohabiting, all right? More than those who are never married and not cohabiting get. So cohabitation is not the same thing as marriage. Right? You think, oh, at least we're cohabiting, we'll get married if we get pregnant. No. 60% get abortions, right? Medication abortions account for the majority of all abortions in the United States. And this is what choice amounts to, a dead baby. All right. There's an increased use of porn because of contraception. Why is that? Again, you're having sex outside of marriage. You're objectifying women. This woman is available to me sexually. Right? She's not the one special woman that I want to marry. She's available to me. Then porn is you're not looking at these because it's the woman you want to marry. It's just for sexual charge. Males use contraception 2 to 3 times, not use porn 2 to 3 times more than women, but women do too. And it's just objectifying the other person. Once people have sex, it turns sex into a performance. and not an expression of love. I remember reading about a boy that was introduced to porn when he was 8, and when he was 14, he was starting to sexually assault women, girls, and when he was caught, he said, I thought that's what they wanted. I thought that's what they wanted, violent sex, because that's what I see in the porn that I'm watching. So men are wanting women to do things women don't want to do. Maybe the men don't either, but they think that that's what you need to do. It certainly isn't an expression of love. It distorts reality. This is not what women want. It creates self-doubt. Am I as good as the men she's watching on porn? Am I as good as the women he's watching on porn? That should be nowhere in your mind. That should be nowhere in your mind. It all should be, I want to express love to this person. I want to make her happy. And I want her to make me happy. And it's not a matter of acting out what we see in porn. It fosters a pattern of deception. Most people who use porn do it secretly. They're not telling their girlfriend or their boyfriend that they're doing this. I'll tell you, marrying a good liar is not a good thing. Right? And it increases the chance of divorce. It actually doubles the chance of divorce. Those who are using porn regularly have twice the chance of getting divorced. And this chart shows you various things here. 40 million Americans are regular visitors to porn sites. 30% of all web traffic is dedicated to porn. 70% of men between the ages of 18 and 24 are using porn. 85% watch between 7 p.m. and 3 a.m. So stay off your phones and your computers between that time. All right, I'm going to try to move more quickly here. Contraception and divorce. Partly is you choose a spouse badly. I mentioned that contraception changes your hormones. There's a marvelous book out. Ladies, go get it. Males, go get it. This is Your Brain on Birth Control. The Surprising Science of Women, Hormones, and the Law of Unintended Consequences. Dr. Sarah Hill doesn't have moral objections to contraception. She has physical and psychological objections, lifestyle objections, which I want to say add up to moral ones, but she doesn't get it. This is the kind of thing that is reported. They did a test. Let's put it this way. Women are attracted to different kinds of males when they are fertile than when they're not fertile. If they're using contraception, they are not fertile. All right? So, what they did was they had two groups of men. One that they considered kind of losers, couch potatoes, non-ambitious, not doing anything. And then more sort of alpha males, leaders, aggressive, athletic, maybe focused. Right? They had them both wear t-shirts for a day. At the end of the day, the women did not meet the males, but smelled the t-shirts. We actually exchange hormones. They're called pheromones through our olfactory nerves. Right? It's through the sense of smell. And when the women smelled the t-shirts of the men who were losers, they wanted nothing to do with them. When they smelled the t-shirts, the non-contracepting women, and when they smelled the t-shirts of the men who were considered alpha prime males, they said, I'd like to meet that man. The women who were contracepting flipped. They were interested in the non-aggressive, non-interesting, easy guys. Because when a woman is pregnant, she's not that interested in a guy who's like uber masculine, right? She wants a friend. And these guys were sort of soft so they could be friends. When a woman is wanting to meet, she wants a strong man, a man with focus, drive, ambition, etc. Now this goes the other way. Men are much more attracted to women when the women are having a fertile cycle. So what they did was they took a slideshow of women, most of them all of them supermodels, and they had the men rate them for their attractiveness. They rated them as very attractive. Then they put something in the room that was soaked with female fertile hormones. Right? And they showed them pictures of ordinary women. And they were more interested in the ordinary women than in the supermodels, right? Because men are attracted to women who have fertile hormones. I saw this work out when I was at the University of Dallas. I would see these women I knew who were very chaste, very pretty, feminine women. The male, and I knew they weren't having sex and weren't contraceptive. The males would just, they'd be like magnets for the males. The males just loved to talk with them, be with them, etc. Then you'd see a woman that was dressed immodestly. I knew that she was most likely promiscuous, walking down the mall. The good guys would look and not look, right? That's awful, that's not good. The bad guys got an eyeful, right? And they were ready to go after that woman. So they say female chemical messengers known as pheromones may help dupe men. I don't think it's duping men, but dupe men into thinking plain women are more attractive and beautiful women are less attractive than they actually are. Then women spend thousands of dollars on makeup, right? When it's their own fertile hormones that will attract men, right? Pheromones, the colorless, odorless chemical signals given off by the study, are thought to affect behavior in both animals and humans at a subconscious level. Right? Divorce rates in the United States, you see in 1960, it was the number of divorce in 1960 around 300,000, and then it just goes up, and then it goes down around 200. It nearly doubled between 1960 and 1980 or so, and that's the period of time when contraception became available. The divorce rate doubled in a 20-year period, which it has never done in the history of mankind. And it started going down around 2000, largely because people just aren't getting married. If you don't get married, you don't get divorced. Right? So, all right, I'm going to go a little faster here. This is a shocking thing to me, but 23% of children under the age of 18 in the United States live in a single-parent household. That's the highest in the world. If our children are the most important thing, they need a father and a mother in the home. Right? We're higher than third world countries. Kenya has 16%. India has 5%. But every woman in the United States who wants contraception has it. And so people say, we have to export contraception to these third world countries. And I say, and they're going to become just like us. All right? The effect of divorce on children is insanely horrible. Right? That lasts into adulthood. It's a marvelous book called Primal Loss, which are the testimony of adult children who are recounting how traumatic it was then and it's traumatic now that that their parents got divorced. A major reason for population is the thought that the world is overpopulated. It's not. It may never have been. And there's every sign that we are soon going to be suffering terribly from underpopulation. A big advocate of that is Elon Musk. He says the biggest problem that will occur in the next 10 years is not overpopulation. Overpopulation is not the problem. It's that people are not having babies. And if you're a conspiracy theorist, even if you're not, you might find it interesting that all these billionaires meet regularly to discuss how to depopulate the world. Right? How to make it that there's fewer people. You can work on that psychology yourself. But this is the population rate going down. This is 1960, was the highest growth of the population since we've been taking records. And then it goes down and down and down until you have populations that no longer, this is worldwide. Right now, Italy, for instance, you need 2.2 children per family to reproduce the family. Italy has 1.2, right? Every year, the population in Italy is going down, 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 down. So far as I know, the only country that has reversed that is Hungary, which is a very captive population, and they've done all sorts of things to make it more attractive for people to have babies. So there are new people who question contraception. It's very interesting. As I said, Elon Musk and even Tucker Carlson are questioning it. Jordan Peterson, his wife Tammy, and his daughter Michaela both speak against contraception as being very bad for them in their own lives, and they think it's wrong for women. Tucker Carlson interviewed this Dr. Kaylee and her brother Casey Means, who are blowing the whistle on how doctors would rather fill us up with drugs because of the pharmaceutical companies rather than help us overcome whatever maladies we have by natural means. And in the course of that interview, which is very worth hearing, Tucker says, well, I was never allowed to question contraception. I was an Anglican. We never talked about it. And if you said anything, everybody just said, what? He said, but I think as we speak, I think I'm questioning it. It was amazing to see him begin to think it through. Again, I highly recommend this book. This is Your Brain on Birth Control, and I have a website, janetsmith.org, that will have this talk and has many other talks. So I thank you for your patience. Oh my gosh, okay. And now we have a chance for some questions.